I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. From coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Just waiting a couple of more minutes as Dr. Monteiro gets things together before we get started, but wanted to just greet everybody, invite you to do all of the things, like, share, subscribe, become a member if you can, support via Patreon. This is a show about communism and redistribution. So let's help Kamau out and get things together, and let's go. So without further ado, anyway, greetings to those who are here live and to those who will see and hear this later. Welcome to you as well. I'm very excited to get into this conversation this evening with our guest, who is Dr. Anthony Monteiro, who, among many other things, is a scholar and an activist, an expert on W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the most cited Du Bois scholars in the world. Dr. Monteiro is also an organizer with the Philadelphia Saturday Free School, about which I'm sure we'll talk at least some, and many other things that I'm very much looking forward to get into with. So without any, again, further ado, welcome to Dr. Monteiro to the platform. It is good to see you again. Welcome to you and to yours, and to those in the background. Greetings to you as well. Peace, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jared. It's been too long.
It's been too long. It has been too long, and I'm very glad to be reconnecting with you for a number of different reasons. So listen. So this is what I'm going to do. So if with your permission, I have a quick an outline for how I would like to start this discussion. And then at worst, I just want to say now, worst case scenario at 7:30, I might need to take a 10-minute break to go pick up my daughters.
Oh, okay.
We're not quite sure how the timing is going to work with the rides, and so we'll see. But at most, it'd be a 10-minute break, which could even just be a long answer for perhaps or something. But anyway, but worst case scenario. But this is what I would like to try to do here with and have a little bit of fun to get this thing started. So I was trying to catch up on some of your work, and admittedly, starting with the interview linked in the show description. And I couldn't help, because I'm also preparing for my hip-hop class, I couldn't help but think of it in terms of something like this here. All right. So folks, bear with me. This is so I was thinking of how to sort of structure a discussion with you to the extent that would be of value. And I thought of three stages or sets of names that come up in that linked discussion that you have, that you had recently, and I'll properly bring that up in a second. And I couldn't help but think, I was like, so if Dr. Monteiro's discussion here was depicted in this way, what would it look like? So I was thinking, so clearly Du Bois would be probably up there where Pac is. Right. Then there would be this other layer. All right. and no disrespect to anybody, just and not saying one is better than the other, just or we'll come back to maybe if that is the case. But under that is a layer of other names: Henry Winston, William Patterson, James Jackson, and Esther Jackson. Then there's another set of names that comes up: AngelaDavis, ManningMarable, CornelWest, and GeraldHorne.
Right.
Then there's another set of names, and that's why I'm glad Eminem is on here. Maybe the only reason I would be glad to see Eminem on a hip hop poster. And it's because in this discussion come up another set of names, including GlennGreenwald, Tulsi Gabbard, Matt Taibbi, and Donald Trump. All right. So but before we get to any of those names, I selfishly want to ask you about one other name, someone you've come across and worked with, and that's Leonard Ball. So I just wanted to start selfishly with that one. Then we can go. Yeah.
You look more like every day, man.
I would have liked to keep some of that melanin, at least just a little bit.
Yeah,
but I hear you. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, Leonard Ball. I didn't know your father as well as other people did. I only knew him indirectly through other people. And he was a hell of a trade unionist out of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
What part of Ohio?
Cincinnati.
Oh, Cincinnati.
Yeah, by way of Kentucky.
Yeah, well, that's the route. And so I know and knew a lot of people very influential on my life from Cincinnati, including Tom Porter and Robert Rhodes.
Right on.
And Ohio produces those type of Black working class intellectuals, likes of which we don't see that much these days. And your father, as I remember him, was always interested in theory and philosophy and knowledge, and frankly, being on the right side of history. He wasn't afraid to be outside of the mainstream of political discourse, even for the trade union movement, which had, that was, when I knew him, that was the time of the last phase of the civil rights movement and then the anti-war movement. And your father was anti-war, and I just saw him as a revolutionary. And we had those types of figures coming out of the trade union movement back in those days. I don't know if your generation has had that experience.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Anyway, I appreciate that. All I got, I took away the bullet points from his life. A certain temper. He carried guns.
Oh, I didn't know.
He read, and this is where I'll segue to your discussion. And he read extensively the works of Lenin and Marx, among others. So those are some of the bullet points that I took away from. So, but let's start, if you don't mind, because I will have us, before we end, come back to answer specifically the question of the relationship that you see Black people should have to communism. But as a sort of pathway to get there, I would want to start with some of that first rung of names that I mentioned. In other words, why is Du Bois for you amongst of all the luminaries that people could sort of pick from? Why has Du Bois been such a central focus for you?
Well, I came to begin to understand the significance of Du Bois when I was in the Communist Party. I'm meeting all these people like William L. Patterson, Henry Winston, Ishmael Flory out of Chicago, and they had all literally been mentored by Du Bois. And, I heard them talking about, as they called him, Dr. DuBois, Dr. DuBois. And they were always talking about Dr. DuBois. And that's Esther and Jim Jackson, all of them. So although I had not had the real chance to read Du Bois, I read him a little bit when I was in college, but to read Du Bois, you need mentorship. You need help.
Reading and studying are not the same thing. I learned that. I feel that more and more every day.
Yes, yes. So I knew Marx better than I knew Du Bois. I knew Lenin better than I knew Du Bois. But then after having, studied all of these figures and being in the world communist movement, which we can talk about, that's one of the things I think is missing in the discourse, primarily for your generation. They talk about radicalism, but they have no understanding of this great movement, the world communist movement, who was a part of it, etc. But even that, as great as that was, to explain the U.S. situation, the American situation, you need Du Bois. Because, Marxism, Leninism is this great achievement in science and knowledge, but it is not the last word. To make it the last word is to descend into dogmatism. And like so many other people, with the collapse of the world communist movement and of the Soviet Union, which we can talk about, I had to reflect. What do we do now? What is to be done? What are the possibilities for revolutionary transformation in the United States? Are they still there? Because, the Communist Party always believed that those possibilities existed. Maybe not immediately, but the Communist Party, and I'm talking about the black people, I'm not talking about the, quote, white left now. I'm talking about the Henry Winston and William L. Pattersons and Jim Esther Jackson. They all believed in the possibility of revolutionary change in the United States. Not all the same, by the way. Henry Winston, I think, in fact, was, in my opinion, the greatest American communist for all kinds of reasons. So with the end of that, what do? Do we throw in the towel? Do we, as a lot of people did, they became liberals and, quote, social democrats. Some went towards black nationalism. You know what I'm saying? Marxism, Leninism has failed. What we believed in, was not true. All of those types of things. But I think Du Bois, his confidence in humanity, in the world's people and the working people of the world, infused in me a sense that we can do this. This country can be changed.
But it's wild for me to hear you say that, with the ability to look back at the fact that Du Bois left, gave up on elections in this country, became part of Nkrumah's Ghana and Pan-Africanism and scientific socialism on the continent of Africa. So given that, and whatever I have wrong about that, obviously correct that. But with that, and then the fact after his death of this collapse of the Soviet Union, why aren't these other offshoots correct?
Well, first of all, Du Bois was not running from the American people or the American ruling class. He was running to Ghana because he was offered by Nkrumah the opportunity to resume work on the Encyclopedia of Africa. That's, kind of would be his last great work. He didn't live long enough. I think Du Bois was one of those people, he never thought he would die. He really didn't, because he was always healthy, he was always strong, his mind was always good. So he wanted to take up work on that. I don't think he did. First of all, he did not renounce his U.S. citizenship. His U.S. citizenship was taken from him by the United States government. Even throughout the 50s with McCarthyism, he was a second-class citizen because of his politics.
But even doesn't that speak to the potential for this revolution in this country in that way to take hold? In other words, yeah. Anyway,
yeah. Well, counter-revolutionary moments do not negate the possibility of revolution. Revolutions are rare events at any time, at the best of times. Even the Russian Revolution, I mean, no one could have predicted that. Everybody would have bet on Germany or England before Russia. But one man said, no, I see a way. I see a path. The contradictions in a world system make one of the weakest or backward nations in the whole system the place where the first rupture could take place. That was a brilliant thing that Lenin did. I mean, if he did nothing else, to have done that. But there was no reason outside of a deep scientific understanding of the working class of Russia, for him to go against everybody's opinion and say, we can do this. We can do this. And he had a party, very small, but they believed in him, in his genius, in his mind. He had been right on many other things. And so it was. Now, as well as Lenin understood the Russian working class, DuBois understands the American working class far better than Lenin understood the Russian working class. And so when he produces Black Reconstruction in America, the great revolutionary text, I mean, and believe me, Jared, people think you're going to speed read that. Or I leaped over this chapter to get you. No.
There's only, I think, 3 chapters that I spent real time with.
Which ones?
And, well, now you put me on the spot. I would have to be looking at it because I always refer to because I know where he talked about the propaganda of history somewhere towards the end. I don't even know if that was in the conclusion. Okay, so that's one. Mm-hmm. But then definitely early on when he's breaking down the Black worker, the white worker. So I don't know if those are all separate chapters, but that section was where I spent most of my time. But even then, this is still 20 years for me already that I spent real time with that book. So I hear you. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I really, the older I get, the more I appreciate that point that you can't just read, you have to study and then you have to revisit. And then, as you even said in your interview, I feel it already too. The memory don't hold on to everything. It's like, you got to keep with it, and it's hard. Anyway, sorry, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, actually, I read Dust Capital, and all 4 volumes, in fact, and but Black Reconstruction is more complex for me than Dust Capital, and in fact is equal to it as a work of scientific understanding, and in many ways surpasses it because Du Bois brings to the table a sociology, which is a more precise science than political economy and the laws of economic behavior, because sociology, in the Du Boisian sense, is this master science, the study of, as Du Bois said, the study of man in all of his and her complexities. So it's all.
And everybody heard. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But just a shout out to Precise Science, Baltimore, Rough Mike, the whole crew. Rest in peace. Like half. Anyway, Precise Science. When you said Precise Science, I was like, I'm in my hip hop studies class mentality too much right now. So I just heard Precise Science, a legendary rap group out of Baltimore. So anyway, just shout out. Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. It's terrible.
Well, see, the king of science. So Du Bois is a figure of the Enlightenment. Reason, science, and practice. So he's a great intellectual. He's a classic intellectual. You know, he is not, he doesn't write articles or books just to brand for the sake of branding himself. You look at his body of work, it's very purposeful. And so when he gets to Black Reconstruction, he calls it his magnum opus. It is that. But then his life doesn't end with that. Almost, 30 more years.
30 more years of writing. But so many Black studies and Black History months, and everybody stops at 1903,
Well,
which was not nothing, but there was so much more to it.
No. And that's part of the tragedy of Black studies at this time. It is adapted to a postmodernist white environment. So in essence, in a philosophical and ideological sense, Black studies is not that different than white studies or just the general university. And the behavior of most Black studies professors is not that different from their white colleagues. The careerist path, don't say anything that will get too close to upsetting the establishment of your university or of the nation, and so on. So Du Bois represents courage. His detractors, excuse me for putting it this way, Jared, are cowards. The attacks upon Du Bois are without principle, and frankly, are generally from people who don't know Du Bois and certainly don't take him seriously. And most Black intellectuals, when you get below the surface, when it comes to Du Bois, they have more or less the position that the white establishment has had, that, well, he's a Negro intellectual. Never that his work, and you can go back to Souls of Black Folk, the Philadelphia Negro, which, I guess he writes too many long books with too much research. But I'm trained in sociology, or a kind of sociology. There's nothing to equal that. Anywhere in the world, even up to this day, where he studied the capacity of Black people, of people who the ruling class of the United States was saying were without human capacity, were below humanity. And he wants to show what their capacity is. And he says it openly: I am bone of the bone and flesh of the flesh of those within the veil. Now, if you want to go to a cultural nationalist thing and say, well, Du Bois was an elitist, Du Bois wasn't really Black.
So hold on, here's the line. There's at least three, or I think there's a couple of lanes of Black criticism that I would want to hear you address, and you touched on it a little bit. First of all, in grad school, I had a white theorist, mass communication theorist, who was considered an elite in his field, a sociologist from England. I'll give him, England. He said he had never heard of,
what was
Michael Gurevich, the late Michael Gurevich.
At Cornell.
Huh?
You went to Cornell.
Well, this was at College Park. I don't remember him being at Cornell. This was when I was at the University of Maryland. Okay. No. When I was at Cornell, I was at the Africana Studies Research Center under Dr. James Turner, and that was for me, it's never going to get better than that. Okay. So by the time I got to the PhD program, I did have a chip on my shoulder. I was arrogant, and I think rightfully so, because, and this is sort of to my point, this leading academician, who I will say, to be fair, was not horrible as a human being, but he said we got into it in one class one day, and afterwards he said he had never heard of Frantz Fanon and never read one word of Du Bois.
Yeah.
And this was a I get it from England, but a sociologist, and at the top of his, and I don't even remember what I said. I think I just blacked out. I can't even imagine how you could be who you are. But anyway, but when it comes to Black criticism of Du Bois, there is that elitist, there's the boule, the line about he's part of the boule, the backs and forth, obviously, with Garvey, and some of the name calling included, never mind the political differences. And then one other big one is, of course, his support for the state and calling for everyone to support the United States in World War I, and his relationship to the U.S. military at that point. Those are, I think, sufficiently would cover a lot of the criticism that we hear coming out of the Black community that is discouraging of engagement with Du Bois. So
it shouldn't. Well, first of all, those criticisms are not of the same quality. For example, if you want to study Du Bois and Garvey, that's one thing, and that should be studied, and I mean rigorously. And Garvey said things about him, and Du Bois gave as good as he got. He was never a coward. He's not afraid of the American government. So, Booker T. Washington, he'd already, been in mortal ideological struggle with Booker T. Washington. And Garvey was Booker T. Washington in maybe a different form. And I think that Du Bois and Chancellor Owens and even the brothers and sisters in
Cyril Briggs.
Cyril Briggs and them, they were prepared to give Garvey a chance, But Garvey was a different kind of person. First of all, see, you can't come from Jamaica to the United States and think you know this situation. This is not Jamaica. This is not Nigeria. To say that we're all, quote, an African people. Well, my father's from an African nation, and they are not like the people right across the ocean from them in Guinea-Bissau. The Cape Verdeans are different. So we each, from a scientific standpoint, has to be studied based on its own specificities. And of course, the United States is a different animal. And that's what Du Bois was thinking. That's what Cyril Briggs and those, as they moved to Marxism and the World Communist Movement, they wanted not talk and rhetoric and performance. They wanted substance. And they demanded that of Garvey, and they demanded transparency of Garvey. Frankly, I'll be very honest with you, I can't figure out why certain people are so enthusiastic about Garvey.
Really?
I don't see it. What is it?
Wow. It's the racial solidarity, pride, African unity.
But he didn't invent that.
I'm not saying he invented it, but he was certainly an exemplar of that. He was. I'm not.
Is he more than Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass?
But wait a minute. Hold on. But to be fair, the question wasn't, is he better than or worse than X, Y, and Z? The question was, why are so many enamored with him? And that's why I'm saying I think that's part of it. It's the and some of it is. Like I remember when Khalid Muhammad responded to a question about why he wore so much jewelry, and he made a comment about Black people wanting to see their people shine and look like kings and all this. There is. I'm not saying it's has the most substance, but it does have, I think, value. It does push a button. It does speak to something that people want and need. Garvey is also, I think, an important exemplar in terms of his independent press work. Even as a symbol of African Pan-African unity or African nationalist unity. That's what I'm saying. So again,
could I give you my take on it?
Of course. Well, yeah, please, of course. But I'm just saying, if you're saying you don't understand why people would be.
No, I don't. I can't. At the level of substance, you know, you know what I think the big thing, because Garvey reappears and becomes a more popular figure after he's dead, and that is in the 1960s, and primarily in the United States, maybe more than even in Jamaica, where as a critique, Garvey is used as a critique of the civil rights movement. But here's the other thing that I would argue, and, you know, I'm prepared to, you know, go back and forth with the Garveyites on this. It was a capitulation to anti-communism. The ruling class had determined that DuBois was an enemy of the state, that his peace activism, his solidarity with the Soviet Union, his Pan-Africanism, which was different than Garvey's. And so there was always that I want to be radical, but I don't want to be smeared with the thing of communism. Mm-hmm. You know, as you know, I faced that with my situation at Temple University. I was attacked as a communist, and that's why I didn't deserve to have a job. Now, a lot of people think, well, that's just, you know, the cultural nationalists don't like communism because communism is European. But that's not the substance of it. Communism is a political category. Anti-communism is a politics. So when you go to anti-communism, and they do, and they have the leading lights in it, they might try to clean things up now. But in the heat of that battle, they were anti-communist. Well, but you're African, you black, you're the blackest of the black, you're the most African. Well, but what about leaders like Sekou Touré, Modibo Keita, Patrice Lumumba, Marion Ngouabe, you know, Amilcar Cabral, you know, all of these figures. Well, how do you situate yourself in relationship to Africa when you pronounce yourself an anti-communist, which is a broad category of smearing the left and the anti-imperialists? It is an attempt, I think, to appear radical, to appear black, while at the same time adapting to the dominant ideology of American imperialism. I mean, that's the way I see it, Jeff. I mean,
So to me, both can be right in the sense that I could see why many African people around the world would be drawn to Garvey. And at the same time, I could see how what you're saying makes perfect sense. So in other words, I can't remember many things, but one of the things I think about often is that Kevin Gaines article of 20, 30 years ago, where he talked about how Harold Cruz's work was supported by the State Department, was supported by the State Department precisely because of this point, that he attacked Robeson, he attacked even John Henrik Clarke, who was seen as too tied to materialism and whatever.
Black left, by the way.
So
you know, Jared, the only one, and this is to Harold Cruz's credit, the only one he doesn't attack is Du Bois. I think.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Yeah.
That was too much. I mean, he can do a lot in that book, but once you get to Du Bois, now you're in a whole different ball game.
By the way, speaking real quick, so anyway, I just wanted to say that. So I that's what I'm saying. I think I can see how all of that could be happening simultaneously, and anyway, I'm not going to argue. I don't want to. That's not, you know.
Yeah.
By the way, I feel a kind of way. I wasn't sure how or if this was going to come up, but so I'm just going to bring this up. And if it's awkward, forgive me to everybody, you included. But you know, we recently did have Molefi Asante on with Nah Dove to talk about in a friendly but critical way their latest book, and your situation did not come up. Now, I know intimately at the time I was supporting you. I was not, would never say I was in Asante's camp, and even with that interview was not necessarily, but I didn't bring it up. I didn't challenge him, and I didn't sort of shadow ban him from the platform for that history. So you know, I don't know if there was anything you would want to say about that or not, but I'm just uncomfortable about not bringing it up. So like I was very uncomfortable not bringing it up during that interview, but it was with other people and about another situation. I didn't want to go to, and honestly, I didn't want to actually hear him. I wouldn't want to hear him try to explain himself there. So I just left it alone. But anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
I don't think you have to be so hard on yourself. I mean, you know, really, I don't think so, Jared.
I don't know if I'm being hard on I just am uncomfortable. I'm just admitting it. So I just wanted to put that out there. I would have, anyway. So
no. It in a lot of ways, his behavior is a wound that has still not been healed on the body of Black academia. I don't know that I'm making myself clear. It was more than about me. It was the eruption and the coming out in the open of the worst, most reactionary trends within Black studies. You know, in fact, I would say even though much of it was inspired by the radical movements of that time, you mentioned your time at Cornell, you mentioned Manning and people like him, but there were many, many more. But then there was the other trend, which was this kind of cultural nationalism, this type of our struggle is a struggle for identity, for a sense of who we are. And we must wall ourselves off from the this vast humanity, be they in China, Vietnam, or Korea, or South Africa, or Cuba. You know, it was a reactionary nationalism. And so the emphasis upon clothing and performance, and then the Africa that they're most interested in under the guise of we have a classical history, a classical civilization, is 5,000 years ago. That's interesting, it's good. But then, you know, for me, again, you know, you got text and you got subtext. Why are you going 5,000 years ago at the expense of understanding what's right in front of your face? In other words, the fact that it is the CIA of, quote, your country that killed Patrice Lumumba. It is the CIA and deep state of, quote, your country that murdered Amilcar Cabral, Marion Ngouabe, that overthrew Kwame Nkrumah. You know, these are the burning issues. So yes, you know, I'm interested like anybody else in ancient Kemet, but not at the expense of the possibility of defeating our mortal enemies at this moment in history. And that's where they went wrong. And so Molefi represents that backwardness. And we always saw it that way. I don't know, you know, again, I asked a question about Garvey. I don't know how people like him become so influential by saying the same thing over and over and over again for 50 years, you know?
Oh, and what's funny to me is that I feel like Molefi Asante has written and talked more about DuBois than Garvey, which I think is interesting.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No. Let me tell you. I mean,
okay, maybe I'm wrong.
I could be wrong, but you know, because we'll get to that talking about DuBois thing, you know, as we go forward. But because you know, in this moment, it's hard not to talk about DuBois. So it's not just talking about DuBois, how you talk about DuBois, how you understand DuBois. But no. Molefi represents a very backward trend in our political and ideological history. It's not, I don't think there's much there. But, you know, I come out of a different tradition.
No, honestly, if anything, I'm more bothered by his engagement with you in the university than anything he's argued intellectually. Like I think that's and that's where I feel that's where I'm feeling in my gut that
oh yeah,
you know, that's what I'm feeling. Like I don't
Jared,
yeah,
Jared,
anyway,
but
you know,
just you know, old head talking to young head, man. One
oh,
door.
yeah.
Well, who's the old head?
I get to be young now. Okay, I appreciate it because I'm talking to students all day. They call I'm called old man so many times. Well, sometimes I forget that there's actually anyone older than me. But sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you know, one door closes, many others open.
I hear you.
You don't. I mean, you know, I'll be very honest with you. Because of my life and my politics, I've never had a secure job history. I've always been fired, always been let go, and I don't say that with any kind of sense of oh me and how bad it's been for me, because it's not been bad for me. But once you stand for certain things, don't expect that Black people, just because you're Black, are going to support you. You understand what I'm saying? And
if you're ever in doubt, come get a job at an HBCU.
Oh, well.
Because I got that on the list to talk to you about too. But by the way, but yeah, anyway.
Let me shut up.
I know you have the no. I took you down that road. I just wanted to. I like I said, I couldn't. I don't know. I had to.
I'll just end this on this. See, I think for me, I think the whole Black Academy needs to take responsibility for the continuation and not reckoning. This is what I want to. Not reckoning with Molefi Asante over what he did to me, because it was no basis for it. I fought for him to be the chairman of the department. You know what I'm saying? And I did it not because of him, but because of the principle that African American studies should have as its chair, in North Philadelphia, by the way, a Black person. And I was prepared to go to the nth degree to fight for that. And then after having won it, he and who is not his friend anymore, Amamazama, well, you know, they split up. You know, they broke.
I do.
Which is so interesting to me. Like what goes around comes around. But no, I had to go on unemployment, had to get my food stamps and stuff for a while. But
yeah, man.
No.
But I'm just saying, like, because that to me is no. I mean, that's just inexcusable, man. I mean, you like to go after somebody's job is that to me. Like there are people, there is a dude still walking around right now who bodied up on me in a hallway at Morgan State University, like want to put his hands on me.
Wow.
And I still didn't want to go for his job.
No.
I'd have rather gone for his throat. But I'm just saying, like, but I couldn't even bring myself to go for that man's job.
No.
So I have to
listen to what I
feel bad about that. I do. I feel bad about that.
No.
And I think you're right about Black studies having a reckoning too.
No, it's on Black studies. So, you know, all of the young scholars who are radical and this, that, and the other, there's still unfinished business. And if you're for real about what you say you are, you need to step up to this and reckon with it. But, you know, don't call yourself a soldier or revolutionary if you're not prepared to sacrifice. If you're not, if you think that you're going to get tenure and do well and run around and talk a lot of talk and not pay for it, no, not in this country. Not in this country. So I really don't feel any kind of way.
I hear you. I just want to, like I said, I didn't mean for us to take this much of a detour. I couldn't not. It became impossible for me not to. And even now, tenure don't even protect you that much anymore. Like even that don't mean anything anymore.
True.
So, okay. Anyway, that said, all right. There's one thing real quick about, well, it doesn't have to be, but about Black Reconstruction that I did not know until I read that discussion, and again linked in the show description. I didn't know that it was a response to Birth of a Nation that just took 15 years or so. That I thought was deep. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the school of historiography that framed Birth of a Nation. But it was way, way, way more than that.
Well, obviously, I know, but I mean, I just didn't even know that had anything to do. Obviously, yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I would recommend it to all people who want to be revolutionaries in this country at this time. You know, it is a great work of philosophy, a great work of logic. It is a literary masterpiece. It's really as good as Victor Hugo's Les Miserables.
Oh, damn. Okay. Well, I never read that either, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Well, I never read that, but you know.
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, it is a great work. It changes everything, or should change everything, you know? It was buried, erased for almost 80 years. It was only with the end of the Soviet Union that it could see the light of day, that DuBois could even be discussed. That's how you get David Levering Lewis being, offered this book deal. I forget the publisher, but one of the big publishers, which got a big advance because the, quote, threat of communism had been eliminated. And so now we can, quote, talk about Du Bois. But before that, there were maybe one or two, but very few courses in this country on anything having to do with Du Bois. And Black studies had abandoned him. Sociology had never discovered him. History saw him as a dangerous communist. And that's why 30 years after Black Reconstruction is published, you get Eric Foner writing a book called Reconstruction, which
you think is even better than Du Bois's, right? It's a great classic.
Of course you jest, right? You're a satire. No, and Eric Foner these days, in this moment of truth, has had to acknowledge, not full-throatedly, not completely, that Du Bois's work is still the great framing of American history and of the class struggle. See, it is a study of the class struggle and of revolution. So a person says, I'm a Marxist, I'm down with the class struggle. The first question I have you read Black Reconstruction? I never heard of it. Well, you might be down with the class struggle in Germany, but not here, where the working class is fragmented along the color line.
You actually make the point that this is in part what elevates Du Bois for you over Marx. And one of the examples.
No, hold it, Jared. I don't say elevates him.
Okay, my bad. Maybe I misread that. My bias. Maybe I thought you.
Well, Tony said that. No. Okay.
Hold on. Because I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna look it up real quick. I'm gonna get the line right. But the point is that the distinction you were drawing is that Marx did not see the enslaved as workers, and that Du Bois did. But I did want to. I made a note to ask you. In that letter that Marx writes to Lincoln after the Emancipation Proclamation, he said, I always think he's kind of playing around, but he says, thank you because you freed the working people of Europe.
Right.
So is that not to say, I'm not defending Marx, I don't want to get, but is that not recognizing the enslaved as workers? If he's recognizing that they will then free
absolutely
another working group, another part of the working class?
Yes. Marx, and science is not dogma.
Mm-hmm.
So Marx's scientific discoveries are, they're unimpeachable. I mean, they're irrefutable. I'll put it that way. So, to acknowledge Du Bois's great scientific achievements is not to negate Marx. Marx saw, although not completely clearly, what Du Bois saw when he writes in Black Reconstruction in the chapter called The Price of Disaster. And he says, and this, it's almost breathtaking in its brilliance. Du Bois says that the defeat of Reconstruction was a defeat for the working class worldwide, and he names China, India, and so on, because the Black proletariat was the spearhead of a potential world revolutionary undoing of imperialism. The defeat of Reconstruction was actually a defeat for working people around the world. Marx saw it in relationship, in particular, to the English working class. And Marx was assuming that the Emancipation Proclamation would be followed on by the consolidation of the power of the Black proletariat, what Du Bois calls the dictatorship of the Black proletariat.
Okay. Just to be clear real quick, just so I'm not thought to be entirely out of my mind, the line was, Du Bois is a Marxist to the degree that he acknowledges the class struggle, but he goes beyond any radical thinkers, even Marx, when he conceptualized that the slaves were workers. Marx comes close in Das Kapital, but no one but Du Bois does it. So you said went beyond, I said elevated. Yeah. So I, but forgive me if I, no. There's a little bit of a trajectory there, but all right.
But it's that dialectic of ideas.
I know, I'm just playing.
The movement of ideas and scientific discovery did not end with Marx, did not end with Lenin. It continued. And Du Bois is the greatest, I think, scientist, especially as he looked at the possible logic of a class struggle in the United States with all of its complexity. Marx knows they were dealing with more simplistic matters where there was not enslavement, where there was not a color line. Even Lenin, in his acknowledgement of the national question, could still not see in its deepest sense how nation, race, and class were all intersecting in logical ways that were unusual. That's what I want to say, and that took a great mind, a tremendous mind, and that's what Du Bois is.
Right on. So let's slightly pivot, and then we can come back to any of this as you like. But if we can, to this next layer of names that I was trying to construct with my silly little hip hop poster comparison. So we got to at least talk a little bit about Henry Winston, William Patterson, James, and Esther Jackson. And if I'm happy to come back, and we can always have you back again and to talk more about any of this. But
Lewis Burnham, I'm just.
No, I know. I mean, I know it could go on. I'm just sticking to that one interview. And by the way, real quick, let me just shout it out more properly. And again, it is linked. It's titled "Tomorrow is Today," an interview with Anthony Monteiro by Zayu Chen and D.L. Douglas in Platypus Review.
Jacob.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What'd I say?
You said Douglas. I think it's Jacob.
Oh, it is Jacobs. I'm sorry. D.L. Jacobs. Sorry about that. I don't know where I got Douglas. D.L. Jacobs in Platypus Review, the Platypus Affiliated Society, and I have to figure out more about that name. But anyway, it's linked in the show description. The next layer of names that you talk about, and and I really did appreciate this. I'm fascinated by the end of the Soviet Union turning point that has this impact on people that you talk a little bit about, like AngelaDavis, ManningMarable, CornelWest, and GeraldHorne.
Yes, definitely.
Could you talk a little bit about that moment and what it is that you're saying and how it's reflective in what we're seeing today?
Yeah. How do I describe it? Because, here I am. I'm not just a member of the Communist Party. I'm a full-time functionary of the Communist Party. My work had been primarily in the international arena, in Africa in particular. You know what I'm saying? And so one of the political assumptions that not just myself, but I mean, Oliver Tambo, or Marion Ngouabe, Amilcar, all of the African revolutionaries, a foundational assumption is one that the Soviet Union was a permanent fixture in world politics, that around the power of the Soviet Union, a world revolutionary movement, where after the Soviet Union, the major center of the world revolutionary process were the national liberation movements, and Africa in particular. And that's not my making this up. Africa was central to the whole strategy of the world revolutionary process. That is why you heard me just be very critical of cultural nationalists, because they were poo-hooing and putting it down, where that's not what the revolutionary leaders in Southern Africa or anywhere else were saying. I, for one, and I would say this for almost everybody, could never have imagined the Soviet Union collapsing. I could never have imagined a leader of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union like Mikhail Gorbachev coming to power, who renounced everything, including the Russian Revolution. And this was so-called done in the interest of world peace and peace among Europeans, and the Soviet Union was more European than it was Asian, which is fiction. And so when the Soviet Union collapses, you have many responses. One, and some of the names of, for instance, Angela, who, if back in the days, Angela was unbelievable. I remember I was in awe of her. First of all, how smart she was, and that she smoked French cigarettes. And we smoking Marlboros, and the way she was so sophisticated and brilliant, far smart. We went to HBCUs, had an inferiority complex at times, but she was spoke many languages, and then she was so courageous, believe me. But then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, she becomes a different political actor. And that's what you see ultimately with one, more an adherence to social democracy, which is not that different than bourgeois liberalism. And then, of course, the supporting of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, the less of evils, and all of that. Manning and Cornell were never in the Communist Party. They were always in the Social Democrats, DSA, I guess it was called. They were like more with Michael Harrington than with Lenin. And I never viewed it, and forgive me for saying, I never viewed that position as a principled one on their part. It was an adaptation to the ferocity of US imperialism and the US state. So if you're going to function in in those places like universities and elite universities, Columbia and Harvard and places like that, you know, first of all, you can't be a communist. Communists have been driven out with McCarthyism. So I thought it was more career than anything else. I don't think to me, there were not strong ideological justifications for that, given the world and how the world was transforming in Africa and Asia and so on. I think the one that's most interesting to me, of course, is GeraldHorne. I mean, really, and I've read so much of GeraldHorne, and because Gerald is a friend of mine, he was a comrade of mine. I read him because I wanted to know what his research found, but because I was proud of him. I always felt that he operated in a kind of a niche, and he was never like a David Levering Lewis or even Eric Foner. Gerald did his thing in the ways that he did it. I was always impressed with his hard work. I don't know how he does it. You know, I used to say he writes books faster than I write my name. But then, and I've never talked to Gerald about this, something happened with that Counter-Revolution of 1776 book. I read it a few months after it came out, and I read it carefully. I can't say that I was able to critique it, you know, because that takes a certain disciplinary expertise that I didn't have. However, I knew that something had gone wrong when in the preface he says something to the effect that now we must abandon workers of the world unite and call for Africans of the world unite. I said, now you're going somewhere else, Gerald. And I'm telling Gerald was I won't say he was a dogmatist, but I mean, he was a Marxist-Leninist. I mean, the general theory of revolution, Lenin, class, imperialism, you know, to then put forward in the place of the call for workers of the world, well, in the world communist movement, it was workers of the world and oppressed peoples unite. And to replace that with the Garveyite slogan, I said, something went wrong. Something has happened. And so I tried to understand, well, what happened? And I said, the big thing that happened was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And Gerald concluded, almost like Francis Fukuyama, I don't think he would say it that Gerald would say it this way, that it was the end of history as we had known it. All bets were off. And now the question is to understand why this happened, although he doesn't explore it, but he does it in the way of studying the American history and the American Revolution. And by calling the American Revolution a counter-revolution, he was going against not just the bourgeois narrative, that's what he says he's opposing, but every revolutionary in the world. I mean, it's Gerald versus Mao Zedong, Gerald versus Ho Chi Minh, Gerald versus Fidel Castro. Every revolutionary movement in the world has acknowledged some indebtedness to the anti-colonial struggle in the United States. Now, okay, that was that. Hold on, let me just make this point, Joe.
No, go ahead.
You know, okay, that was when I read it, 2015. Okay, I said to myself, Gerald made a mistake. I felt Gerald had made mistakes in other books, like the book on Shirley Graham DuBois, you know, and Gerald, his book on Paul Robeson, he makes mistakes. Really, he makes mistakes. sometimes carelessness, too fast, you know. But, you know, some people are driven that way. That's his personality. That's him. You know, he has to do it, and he does it. But this was something new. This was a paradigm shift. This was an ideological shift. It didn't mean a great deal at the time the book was published because, again, it's Gerald. He writes in a niche academic way for academics. But then you come in 2019 with the 1619 Project. And Hannah Nicole Jones says, well, if you want to know, she didn't put it this way, but if you want to know what the foundations of what I'm doing is, it's GeraldHorne's work. So now GeraldHorne is a public intellectual, a major figure in the political life of the country. The other thing is, Gerald had been deeply troubled by the election of Donald Trump. He felt that Donald Trump was a fascist, that he was leading a racist movement, and that, as Gerald said, we had to bring Trump down by any means necessary, which I thought was a little extreme. I don't know whether you prepared Gerald to do by any means necessary, but at any rate, so it was like a shock to him, a trauma to him. And so the 1776 book then becomes a cornerstone of what he will do politically going forward. And it is ultimately, and I'll end on this, it is the victory of pessimism in the life of GeraldHorne. I mean, so severe. And again, you know, I'm relating the personal to the scholarship and to the politicization of Gerald. I heard an interview with Gerald, and I had to ask some people, did I hear what I heard? Where he said to resolve the race question in the United States on terms something like the Lancaster House talks between the British and the liberation forces in Zimbabwe. He said to arrive at that type of negotiations, there would have to be a shock to the global system, including nuclear war. I said, wait a minute now, hold on. Because here then, in my interpretation, was going from, okay, a certain pessimism, the American people are incapable of revolution, they've never been able to do it even from the beginning, to now a deep, deep pessimism that a shock to the world order, where U.S. imperialism is pushed back on its heels, and including a nuclear war or nuclear exchange, would be necessary for the U.S. government to negotiate with Black people about our freedom. It just, yeah.
So let me, all right, okay, real quick. I just want to, a couple of things, because I did want to, this is to your point, what Horne says at whatever part of the Kindle book this is towards, but he says, nonetheless, is one of the few who has investigated systematically the dilemma of Africans enslaved and free from the 17th century to the present across continents and far-flung seas alike. I am tempted to conclude that the older radical slogan, Black and white unite and fight, as a prescription for transformative change in this republic, needs to be supplemented or supplanted altogether in favor of a less poetic and catchy Africans here and abroad unite and fight in league with a powerful foreign ally. So without going, spending all day, I just wanted to because I think that's what you're referring to when you're talking about the switch in slogans. But all right, so as someone who has, all right, so first of all, Nikole Hannah-Jones, it's so wild that she says that about Horne's work, because either she didn't read the entire book, or she doesn't understand the entire book, or she's fraudulently only associating with the part that's comfortable for her, because I don't think she would agree with his conclusions, which is why he doesn't have, I assumed, I don't know, I'm guessing, why I think he didn't have his own section in that book, and he doesn't appear in the Hulu series talking about the 1619 Project. So in other words, I think she glommed on to, I'm speculating, but it feels like she picked that one point about enslavement being, slavery being the key to the whole Revolutionary War, so that she could build her version of a race first analysis that is very liberal and soft, but that doesn't agree with even Horne's differently styled race first approach. So that's just one thing. Well, the other thing, go ahead.
If I could just say,
sure.
I think they're connected almost seamlessly.
Okay, go ahead.
I would just say that, and see, the assumptions are the same, that from 1619 up to now, the United States has been a cauldron of counter-revolution. That to call any, right. See,
I'm trying to hang with you. But it's hard. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. I know, we are all impacted by the zeitgeist. And this is the popular view today. And sadly, too many academics have not critically looked at this. This is why Black Reconstruction is so important. I often say, well, anyway, I think they're seamless. I don't know why Gerald's not in the Hulu thing. Maybe he didn't want to be in it, but there is no question about it that Gerald was in fact invited to the New York Times when
I saw that. I did see that. No, but my only point in that is that, just very quickly, is that Nikole Hannah-Jones's argument is specific to the United States with the goal of getting reparations, which is why Sandy Darity is the sort of the big name at the end, and that's the whole point seems clearly. And Gerald's is an internationalist perspective, even if it may not be yours, but it is an internationalist perspective in the sense that he's saying we have to look beyond the boundaries of the United States for our salvation, even if it is in the African world. But
there's more than that, Jared.
Okay, go ahead.
No, there is no revolutionary that I know of. Frederick Douglass going forward. When you're talking about Henry Winston and these people who were not internationalists. That's one of the things about the world communist movement. We are internationalists. But no one that I know of, and I think Gerald would admit this. And I'm like you, I heard you when you said Gerald has to answer these criticisms. And you just can't say that, oh, these are just white socialists who are out to get me. No, Gerald. These are substantive critiques of your logic. You must answer these criticisms, not just for your sake, but for the sake of the people that follow you. Because what's going to happen? A lot of them are, we have to defend Gerald, and Gerald is attacked by the white left. I don't know if they know that Gerald comes out of the white left, but, and so on and so forth. But what happens when it becomes totally clear that Gerald has made a serious mistake, that he has misquoted people? And these people show this. I don't care if they're white, black, or yellow. or pink. That's what they show. He has to address these claims, you know. But I think, if I could just say, he doesn't, because what does he say? What does he say about the Somerset case? About the case of those ships off of Rhode Island? I forget the exact. I mean, so he made. Oh, I'm sorry. Go. I'm sorry.
But anyway, no, I hear. I don't, because I hear you, but personally, at least, I don't. My conclusions that align with Horne's conclusions are not because of Horne or his conclusions. They just happen to align. No, I think there are other ways of getting there.
And your alignment is over the question of settler colonialism.
Very much so.
Okay.
So I did, I'm happy to have, we can, I'm trying to find out now if I have to take that 10-minute break or not, but that notwithstanding, that is something on my list of potential topics for tonight, or if necessary, another time. But dang, there was one other thing real quick about this. There was a segue I was trying to build here. Okay. It'll just have to come back. All right. So let me get to this third rung of my names real quick and start there, and then we can double back to any of this. And I do want to talk with you about the settler colonial, internal colonial piece. But this third rung, because this was the segue, because so much of your argument I rock with. It works for me. But where it doesn't is in this next rung of names. All right. So for instance, in this interview, and this is why I'm saying I made the point about Eminem being on that lower rung of that hip hop pile there. Because you come back and say that after you've said that too many Black academics lost their sense after the fall of the Soviet Union, you say, quote, "I am encouraged by people like GlennGreenwald, Tulsi Gabbard, and Matt Taibbi." And then you said that you voted in the last election for Donald Trump. So all right, so
and I find it such an easy thing. Well, go ahead.
Well, the Trump thing, I get. I could not have tactically done that. I get your point, but it's the GlennGreenwald, Tulsi Gabbard, and Matt Taibbi in the intervening years since you gave that interview. You have to have seen that they have also, for whatever other reasons, lost their mind. And I think, oh man.
And I'm not, it's not an endorsement. I was just saying there are more people like me than the mainstream media would have.
But your point, so your tactical, as I understood it, your tactical decision to vote for Trump,
right,
is tactical in a given context. These other three white folks that you mentioned, their move to the right in these last couple of years, this last year in particular, this with this claim that they are opening up the tent and appealing to those Donald Trump supporters, they're not communists. They're barely left it. GlennGreenwald was confused by cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Glenn has, they also supported Obama. They are advocating a rightward libertarian move. Matt Taibbi's taking money to write silliness about Elon Musk and Twitter. I mean, so I don't, that part I don't get. But anyway, go ahead.
No, you see, first of all, one of the assumptions that I proceed from.
Oh, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Forgive me. The segue I was trying to complete there is that with the fall of the Soviet Union, with, as I mentioned earlier, the move DuBois ended up making, with so much that we've seen continuing to happen, specifically to Black people. Horne's analysis, not the Obama support notwithstanding, seems to make much more sense to me than finding hope in these GlennGreenwald types and their libertarian push. Okay, go ahead. That was the segue. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm trying to find hope in them at all.
Okay.
If there's anything about GlennGreenwald that I really respect, a lot of things I respect about him as a journalist, is his thing with Edward Snowden and the exposure of all of that. But, listen, I'm not trying to find hope there, but I am drawing attention to the fact that they have taken on in various and differing ways the neocon elite that are running the foreign policy of this country and dragging us closer to war. You want to know why I voted for Trump? Because I can't say I knew. I suspected that if Biden won, that he would go crazy because they had lost so much under Trump in terms of NATO, in terms of
You mean Hillary Clinton, if Hillary had won?
No. If Biden wins.
Oh, you voted for Trump in this last.
Yeah, I didn't
the
vote
second time. I'm sorry.
Jill Stein.
Okay, right. I'm sorry. Right. Sorry about that. Right.
I wanted Trump to beat Hillary Clinton because I couldn't.
I'm not mad at that. I just think it's just funny. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm not mad at it. I didn't support him. I haven't voted for Clinton since Bill. So I'm with you.
So I'm crazy enough to openly say it. And I think that people like yourself and others, like Noam Chomsky, hates Trump. But he agrees on this, that the only major Western leader that could have prevented this war in Ukraine is Trump. And so it's hard. Isn't that hard?
It's crazy. I know.
But the whole say this, and it is crazy. But we're in times like this. We're in these unusual times. Who would have ever thought that a guy like Trump, I mean, in a lot of ways, unprepared to be president, unprepared to govern, didn't think he was going, that's why he ends up with all these John Boltons and all these people. But the point was that he represented a shock to the system. Politically, the system will never be the same again. The other thing in 2020, I suspect, I'll put it that way, Biden wins, war. We are closer to nuclear war than we've ever been. And now these people talking about war with China too. We've never experienced this. Trump represents the opposite to that. Is that where my hope rests? No. I'm still a DuBoisian. The central thing of my hope is the Black working people. That's where the hope is. But in the meantime, Baldwin, in the long meantime, we have to, and of course, as revolutionaries, revolutionaries are not, they don't stand out for being safe. So I could see a Lenin saying, look, we go with this cat because he undermines the system. The whole ruling class is against him. That should tell us something. Why are all of them? Why? Because he's an orange-looking guy? I don't think it's because of the way he looks. They understand that the American political system cannot absorb but so much shock. And the system is being taken to places it's never been. The political elite are being forced to say and do things they've never done. This is important. You weaken this ruling elite. How far it will go, we don't know. But this is what we're dealing with now. And as a revolutionary, I wasn't afraid. It's calculated risk. Revolutions are about calculated risks. Like I told you, I've never been able to keep a job for so long. Because
hey, listen, it's not. It was more. It's not that I don't understand or even appreciate your point, and in many ways, people put me in a similar camp just because I didn't vote for Hillary or this one Biden. You know, they said the same thing. If you don't vote for a Democrat, you're basically electing Trump. And I was like, well, that's not on me. You know, like that's more on you if he wins and you don't like it. But anything else.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. You know, all of those people who were excoriating you because you didn't vote for either of them, what do they have to say about this mad push towards world war?
Well, now this is part of the point that I think you're right about. Now they just keep going along, and we've even seen some of our own, not maybe BPM per se, but some of our extended circles get dragged into this support for Zelensky, and you know, basically waving the Ukrainian flag, and we got to get Putin, and like they falling right into the whole thing. So I'm with you on. That's what I'm saying. I rock with you. We walk together a long way before we take a separate step. So I'm just saying that's all I'm saying.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There are black people are waving the Ukrainian flag. You've seen black people?
Not physically. Oh, okay. No, I didn't mean to say that. No, I didn't mean to go that far. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go that far. But I'm sure there are though. What I was saying was that there was. I'm thinking of that letter that brothers I have crazy respect for, but like Herb Boyd and Don Rojas signing that letter of support for Ukraine and the whole thing about, you know, basically whatever that whole thing was. I mean, it's madness. Just as the same way I thought voting for I mean, up until this whole thing with Horne, the only time I thought Horne made a mistake was when we were on that panel together and he said he couldn't tell yet. History would take a while to tell us if Obama was going to be bad or not. And I was like, I don't agree with that. Like, Obama's clearly like, I don't see why we don't see that. But that actually leads me to, so by the way, I don't have to take that 10-minute break. So if you're okay with time, we can keep, you know, but I'll use that as a segue to get to something else big that I wanted to get to you with before we do wrap up, and then however long you want to go and however much you want to come back to in this conversation, I'm happy to. But one of the reasons that I was always clear from jump on people like Obama was because of the late great Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon and Black Agenda Report. And there was something that, and I've talked a little bit here about, you know, my unfortunate, you know, whatever, but with Glenn and all of that, but the analysis was never the question. And one of the things that you said in this interview that I thought was very interesting was that you said, quote, "I'm sad about what's happening to Black Agenda Report now that Glenn Ford is gone." And that's when you said the very next sentence was, "But I'm always encouraged by GlennGreenwald." And I was like, you messing up with the Glens.
Why
my terror. I wanted you to. Go ahead. I
mean, well, Glenn Ford is not Glenn Greenwald.
I know. That's why I was like, how could you?
No, and I wasn't. I was not equating them.
No, I know.
I don't know Glenn Greenwald, but
it was just the way it read. That's all. I got you. Go ahead.
But as a journalist, I mean, look,
I think you got to look more carefully at what he's done in these last couple of years, including with the Snowden archives and he's really gone in a rightward trajectory. I think that's why I'm saying I think you caught him at a particular moment and haven't seen this rightward slide. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Rightward slide. I was at a march on February 19th in Washington. Mm-hmm. And as you know, a lot of people attacked it because it was was organized by a right wing.
You were at that?
Was I at it? Hey, look, what?
No, we had a whole issue with our platform. Yeah, you heard about all that, right? Right.
It was absolutely.
I didn't know you were there, though.
Why not? Why weren't you there?
Because exactly why Jackie said, and exactly what I've said about. Look, man. See, this is the this is the thing. I just quickly, I'm not, and I'll admit all of the flaws in this. I am not showing up to march with, work with, team up with the Ron Paul types and all of them types. It's not happening. It's just not happening. So if you and others are going to do it and it's going to work out in this, like I joked before, I'll meet you in the middle and we'll start swinging together then. But until then, we are going to be on opposite ends of this fight. Yeah. I just can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
But the problem is you and I haven't talked enough in these. No, seriously. You know,
oh man. Okay.
There's something missing because I wanted to, this is left, right, the right, and so the left is supposed to be marching in March, right? March 19th. They're going to have their peace march, right?
Honestly, I'm not even entirely sure. I'm not even sure.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I'm not even sure that I do, to be honest, but that could be just my fault.
A coalition that rejected the march on February 19th is marching on March 19th or the 18th, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the demands of each march. If the march on February 19th was the right wing, well, it seems to me that this left coalition is to the right of them in terms of demands. And I went to Washington because I supported the demands of the march. And they were left and, quote, right. But what was significant, I saw this in the time of the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement. Everybody wasn't believing the same thing. And there were people, and this is where King ran into all this problem with the civil rights movement, people who said that peace can't be mixed with our movement because we have a president that we have to protect, which was Johnson. I think it's an underestimation of the crisis that we're facing right now. And by the way, you might find this unacceptable. I gave an interview, and maybe I'm thrown off, but I gave an interview with Don DuBois, and and I said, part of the problem with those who reject the march is an ideological problem. I said it's neo-Trotskyism and neo-cultural nationalism. And on the black side, it's, I don't know what I know you weren't alive during this time, or maybe you were, but just a baby. But, when a whole section of the cultural nationalists who are into identity and culture and names and that type of thing suddenly became communist. And that was, under the influence of the great Amiri Baraka, who went from the US organization to, the Communist something organization that he became a part of. And so a whole group of people followed him. But then I don't think they ever critically came to grips with who they were and had they given up anything to become who they wanted to be. I don't think they ever gave up a whole lot. And again, it's a part of, it's like, I'm a Garveyite and I'm a communist. Well, you can't be both, in my opinion. You have to make a choice. But it's safe not to be, see, just because you say you're a communist or because you say you're a radical, that's you saying it. But there are criteria by which we can judge you. And ultimately, the criteria is what you do in practice. In other words, if a threat of world war exists, and it does, I can't say who I will march with or not march with. I will march with all and everybody that wants to oppose this, which means opposing the Biden administration. I think part of the underlying thing of the, quote, left opposing the march is the fear that the march and what it represents might put Trump back in the White House. And they would prefer to keep Trump out than to prevent a world war.
I think there's at least a wing of us that don't see it that way at all.
Okay.
And I can't speak for anybody, but I, first of all, the assumption is that showing up at this particular march is going to stop anything.
No. You're
okay,
right.
Hold on. Right?
Yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. See, it's not that cut and dry. Showing up at a march, especially one that only had 2,000 people, is not the end of the story. It is but the beginning.
Right, but then to assume that people who don't show up at that march are not sufficiently radical or anti-war, or want Trump, or afraid because they think Trump will get elected and they don't want Trump, I think is a mistake.
Yeah, but
particularly, for instance, I'm in that group. Whatever that group is, I'm in that group. I don't need to march with these folks to be anti-war or to support an anti-war movement. And I'm definitely not afraid of a Trump re-election. And I'm in many ways in your camp in terms of what the impact of his election is. But because again, but I think my thing is, it's the wrong coalitions that are forming that allows too much of this to continue and get worse. If people would more coalesce with those who are not overtly libertarian, right-wing, racist, etc., that work, I think, would be much more of an impact and more meaningful. And saying to those, look, if you want to be anti-war, that's great, go be anti-war, but you also have to check all of these other tendencies that you have if you want to work with us. So that's in short where I am with it.
Yeah,
but,
and I'm only talking from my experience, my political education, the training that I had, and that is that, change is not a comfortable thing. I mean, we don't choose how this will happen. We have to deal with the realities that we're presented with. And again, I say I approach this as a revolutionary. And I don't see it as a one-off. I see a process. In fact, something, Jared, I would say two things. One, the U.S. people are more anti-war today. And I'm talking about the U.S. people as a whole, not just Black people. Of course, Black people, probably the most advanced, but the U.S. people more anti-war now than at the height of the anti-Vietnam War marches. The American people are war exhausted and trace the problem of war and peace to a government that they feel is illegitimate, that is sending money to Ukraine, and you got these people in East Palestine. I just read a story about the state of Washington and the cutback in food support for people. And this is going on across the country. So I marched with them. I'm not afraid because I know what I stand for. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not.
Hey, if those people want to show up at my march, I'm with that. I don't have a problem with that. But if it's under the banner and in league with the Tulsi Gabbards and the Ron Pauls and all of these other, like that, to me is the lunacy. And again, I think if you pay a little more attention to GlennGreenwald and all these folks, and Tulsi Gabbard included, their break with the Democrats, their break with is not a leftward break. They have zero experience or interest or education in Black radical traditions, in Communist Party histories.
But why would I set that up as a purity test?
No, it's not. I'm not
asking that.
You just said it was a purity test if I don't show up at that march. You just said it was. You just use that as a purity test against us.
Jared.
Go ahead.
There are very few Black people out here today that will say, I was a member of the Communist Party, or I was a member of the... They don't say it. And I think that's a disservice because it does not help to educate your generation or a person like you. As communists, as revolutionaries, I don't care whether you in Vietnam or Cuba, anything to stay the hand of your own imperialism, the imperialism of your country. We're not just in, and this is not France. This is not England. This is the most dangerous imperialist nation in all of history. And the question for us is, what is to be done? I don't set up purity tests. I ain't gonna march with you because you ain't, Hey, look, what does marching do? It transforms people.
Oh, I don't even know if I agree with that. I don't. And you did set up a purity test, by the way, saying those who don't show up at that march are not sufficiently communist or radical. So I mean, it is a little bit.
I don't expect them to be communist.
No, but you said if we don't show up at that rally, that was a test of our how sufficiently radical we are. And all I'm saying is I'm with you on the severity of this empire and the threat of war. I just don't think the actual way to end war is to build with them. And I don't think marching with that particular group is because they're not the working people. They're not. They're as fake they're as fake on the white side as you're saying the black non-communists are on this side. But they're not really trying to reach out to their working people and bring them to the left. That's why. Go ahead.
I'm not asking anybody to adhere to, quote, communist principles.
Okay.
So don't say that I use the purity test of Paul is not a communist. So I can't get down with him, but so far.
It just sounded like you were saying that we who didn't show up were not sufficiently concerned with empire or ending war. We're not moving left enough. And I just don't see that.
I said what I said. I said it's a holdover of ideological positions that I am familiar with from the 1960s. And I'm saying it's neo-Trotskyism or what I would call vanguardism, that we lead the peace movement, and anybody that doesn't come through us is trying to co-opt us and our demands.
But that's what these folks are saying, and they are a co-option. They are. When they that's what they're saying. That's why they attacked us. Because they were saying because they were saying, how dare you stand apart from this most legitimate of all efforts and stop and hurt your effort to end the war, as if not supporting a Jimmy Dore-led rally is somehow blocking us from the revolution. Like, that to me is, but this is the one, and this is the segue I want to make to get to at least one more name, and then we can go on, we can take questions, whatever you want to do. But because Max Blumenthal, your co-marcher, sat up there and suggested that this formation was a more legitimate heir to the legacy of Fred Hampton than what, for instance, those of us over here are doing, which I think is the most clear example of the buffoonery and backwardness and ill logic involved with that effort. But in your interview, you do bring up Fred Hampton and say a number of interesting things. One, of course, that you knew him and worked with him. And then you said something to the effect that he was the closest to adhering to the Marxist tradition that you had come across. And importantly, and this is what I wanted to ask you about. It's so funny we're having this argument.
Hold on, wait a minute. Not that I had come across, but in the Black Panther Party.
In the Black Panther Party. Sorry, thank you. Sorry, that's good. Thank you for that. Very good, very good. But this is why I think it's interesting we're having this back and forth, because you make a positive reference to Hampton's reluctance to link up with the Weather Underground, but his correctness in trying to develop that original Radical Rainbow Coalition. That's exactly the dividing line that I think is playing out with this march. We're, to the extent that there's this dividing line, we're trying to build the actual legitimate Fred Hampton Rainbow Coalition. They are doing the exact opposite and have zero interest or connection to the Fred Hamptons of today. So that's why it was so. But anyway, say anything about that you like and anything else, because we've pretty much covered what I had hoped to get to, other than the grand finale question. But go ahead, go ahead.
I mean, one of the things that's clear to me. We think in different ways, our methodologies, and I think you're a rhetorician and a polemicist because. Yes, you are, because you have a way of taking things that I did not say and attributing them to me. But that's okay, Jack.
I apologize. At least I'm happy to talk with you and have you correct me.
Oh no, I'm just, but and I said, and I say it again. I don't care whether it's Donald Trump or the march on the 19th, February 19th. We were faced with a practical political problem, a problem that would not be solved through theory or rhetoric, but it's on the ground problem. Now, whether that march was the exemplification of the Rainbow Coalition, obviously not. How many instances of it have we seen? Even Fred Hampton and them were unable to fully consolidate the Rainbow Coalition. I mean, the color line is real, and so on. But my point is that revolutionaries have to make evaluations based upon what they see as the ultimate objective. Either we're going to fight the imperialism of the United States, which is more united, the elite, the war makers are more united today than ever before. I mean, even during Vietnam, the elite were not this united. Why are they so united? Pushing this country further and further to war, unless we're to believe that, well, there are two imperialisms. It's Western imperialism and Russian imperialism. No, I don't think that's the case at all. Or now, then we'll have Chinese imperialism. Unless we're prepared to uncritically accept the ideology and the rhetoric of the ruling class of this country. You mentioned Henry Winston. And, I worked very closely with him, was around him a lot. And his thing was always, we must do all that we can do as communists. We couldn't determine everybody else. Do all that we can do to encourage people to fight this ruling elite, no matter what method or forms it takes. The other thing I would say, the American people are less racist than they've ever been in their history. The country is not more racist than it was in 1963, less racist. And if you do any sociological study, it shows that. Now, what does that mean? That means the capacity, a possibility of forging unity are greater than ever before. Now, a lot of people don't think unity is necessary. That's why you have purity tests. But if I'll take you wherever you are and let's move forward. It's just like Horne says, I don't believe in black and white unite and fight. Well, you wouldn't have the industrial unions of this country if that slogan was not implemented. Black and white unite and fight. In fact, that slogan was literally taken into the civil rights movement. That King said, black people alone can't change this country. We have to appeal to the hearts and minds of the masses of people. And revolutionaries from throughout the world said, that is what we want you to do. That is what makes it real for us. During the anti-apartheid struggle, if we had, you have to be a socialist, you have to be this, that, or the other. Oppose the U.S. support of South African apartheid. Yeah, after the struggle is won, everybody's, I was on that side. No, you weren't. No, they weren't. And so I think I have a right, and I should, critique those who abstain. We should have all been there at that march. Make it blacker, bring some black people, And you mentioned MaxBlumenthal. What about Dennis Kucinich's speech?
To me, it loses its value given who he was talking to and talking with and looking to build with. That's my point. Dennis Kucinich could have, if he had been invited to and showed up at other formations or maybe this next one, that's great. And this is my point. Max and whomever else, they have known for years about me and others as individuals. They've known about black people and movements and other formations and collectives for years and have willfully ignored them in favor of building with people they're more comfortable with, which is part of what exactly is the problem, which is the right. They've gone rightward. And so they haven't consolidated. They know full well about a more radical white left than themselves, but they didn't look to build with them. They went to the right because that's where all the money is. So it's easy to say abolish the CIA. If you're gonna do that standing next to Ron Paul. I mean, come on, man.
Let me ask you a question, Jared. If it's so easy to say abolish the CIA, why isn't it part of the demands of the march coming up in March?
I don't know. I don't know what I have nothing to do with that march. I don't know.
But if you had a march,
maybe it's because it's a silly slogan. It's far less of a yeah, because what's likely, is that really likely to happen? Is that likely to motivate people? Are they really going to say, oh, they said abolish the CIA and we're going to do that? I mean, that to me is, again, that to me is more of an avoidance of all of the other movements that might have helped coalesce and build something. If they had been more involved with the anti-police violence movements or George Floyd, or if they had really built with grassroots world majority people in all of these intervening years, maybe they wouldn't find themselves in a position where they feel like, oh, the only people I can build with are to the right. And by the way, it's not coincidentally helps them with their YouTube numbers, subscription numbers, funding, Patreon numbers. There's always more money in that direction. So anyway, I just don't see it. I don't, but to your point, you and others are going to support that more in March 19th, right?
Yeah, but the only thing I won't, but hold it, let me just, I won't be there because we are, wait a minute, Jared, wait a minute, money, because we're organizing, and this has been planned way before the march.
Okay, I hear you.
We're organizing a 2-day conference on peace on the Korean Peninsula, where we're going to focus upon North Korea and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, that's why I won't be there. And
but you'll positively support and promote it the way we were condemned for not doing for this last one, apparently. So,
but Jared, because somebody criticizes you or has a different opinion, that doesn't mean they condemn you. I mean, I disagree.
Oh, but I gotta see. Did you see? I mean, look at how they really came at it. I mean, it was really disingenuous. Is my point. That was my point. Specific to me, you're calling out my name when you've ignored me when I asked you to support Mumia. They could have gotten involved with that. They wouldn't even say his name. Well, I don't know about that. But they certainly didn't do any serious coverage of him in support. They haven't done it. I mean, so like that to me. Anyway, it's all good.
And I will predict, Jared.
Yes.
As you become more experienced, and as you begin to understand, and I'm speaking as your old head, as you begin to understand the stakes. See, revolutionaries are not in it to be slapped on the back and said, "Yeah, you were right about this," or we find no. We're in this. It's a selfless job, revolutionary activity. And the point is, if somebody's against the CIA and the military-industrial complex, if that's what their demands are, then let's march. I say to everyone, let's march. If you want not one more penny to Ukraine, this is probably the greatest international crisis that we have seen since World War II. This is a tremendous. How this goes will decide the architecture of world and international relationships for going forward. This is how important this is. And so, from my point of view, I'm for shock to the system. I'm for contesting the elites, whoever does it,
I hear you. It just doesn't make sense to me that people who won't defund the police or the military are suddenly going to shut down the war and get rid of the CIA.
But Jared, okay, maybe it doesn't make sense to you.
but maybe it will one day. Because I'm gonna keep working.
Maybe not one day, maybe very soon.
Maybe very soon. Okay, all right.
People have to make a decision. And it's a moral decision. You know, I'm of the, you know, I'm materialist and all of that. But, you know, so much starts from the heart. You know, I know you're an academic. You into the realm, the universe of words and so on. But the deeper questions are moral.
Because that's such. Because it's obviously because I get it. I hear what you're saying. That's why it's funny.
Sometimes you got to go. You say, "Well, I don't like people that voted for Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden." You know what I'm saying? I mean, that was to me that was egregious. How do you do this?
I'm with you on that.
For me,
100%.
So the same thing. Those people that voted for these warmongers, but who themselves are anti-war, they could have come to this march. If you could have voted for Joe Biden, you could have been at a march with the Libertarian Party and the People's Party and Ron Paul, among others. If you could have voted, and they did. And I bet you, if you take the Answer Coalition, if you take Black Alliance for Peace, a lot of those people, if they didn't, well, they might not say it to us, but secretly voted for Biden. They're not that radical that they have, well.
I don't know about that. Honestly, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But again, speaking of Answer Coalition, for Max and them to stand up there and say that these are the true revivers of an anti-war movement, and did they reach out to Answer? Did they reach out to Brian Becker and them? Did they? I mean, that's the real anti-war movement since the turn of the century, if there has been one. So why haven't they weren't building with them?
How do you say that's the real anti-war movement?
I said since the turn of the century, since the 2000s, since the Iraq invasion, this re-invasion, Answer has done way more to be an anti-war movement than certainly any of these folks. So to act like it's them, they're claiming to reinvent the wheel that they never supported in the first. Come on, man. You didn't see. I mean, look, I saw it intimately living in DC, being active in DC, even arguing against Answer at one point because we thought that they were, taking racially too much credit for the movement, but they were doing it. And Max and them weren't supporting them. They weren't building with them. So they haven't interviewed them. I don't even think once in all these years they've been doing this work. And then they come out now as if they're
Hey, Jared.
Go ahead.
But isn't it a more serious matter than Answer and Max Blumenthal?
No, that's my point, though. Of course it is. Of course it is.
So my point is, I don't even know how to discuss those people like that. Because frankly, I don't know that much about any of them or either of them, but I do know that the American people are war exhausted. I have assessed, and this is a political assessment, and revolutionaries have to know the people of their own nation, not somewhere, these people. They are more anti-war today. And this is the problem that the Biden administration is going to face politically right now. Because the people that we have called, I won't say we, but so many people called racist and despicable and fascist, they're the ones saying, why are you spending that money in Ukraine and we ain't got food in the state of Washington? That is the way that people evolve. That's what we're talking. See, I think you focus too much. Max Blumenthal and the Answer Coalition.
No, that's not. No.
Neither are major strategic players. Once a lot of this gets in the hands of ordinary people, things change. We've never seen a peace movement like this, and I've never seen Answer Coalition appeal to them, them poor whites or them poor black people. I've never seen it. Now I'm from Philadelphia. Maybe they do it in Washington, but I'm from here. And we got a lot of poor white and black people. Matter of fact, we're the poorest big city in the country.
So, all right. Okay. So we're at 2 hours. Let me do a time check. How you feeling? How much more time do you want to put to this? And I'll let it get, and and again, this doesn't have to be the end, so we can always have you come back. It's all good.
I'm good. We can do about 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay. Let me just see. So let me just ask the grand question, and we'll beg our audience's forgiveness if we don't get to their questions. I've stayed entirely out of the chat this entire conversation because I've really enjoyed it. Want to stay focused, but so the build up really for me, the culminating question, just to try to tie it all up, is what then do you, from your estimation, should be? I think we've talked a little bit about what it is, but what should be the relationship between Black people and communism?
I wouldn't try to answer that. Black folk have to decide it. I mean, for me, at the time that I joined the Communist Party, I wanted not just to be connected to the struggle here, but the thing that was motivating me most was the global struggle. The global struggle for unity, and like the African leaders that I mentioned, probably not well known, Marion Ngouabe, Modibo Keita, Sekou Touré, of course, Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar, Oliver Tambo, Alfred Nzo, these people, all of the ones that I thought were the spearhead of the African anti-colonial and anti-neo-colonial struggles were communist. And this concept of a world communist, a world revolutionary movement, a world revolutionary process. Now, I think Black folk will decide what their relationship to world humanity is. And this is where the ideological struggle amongst and between ideologues and activists in the Black community is so important. And I'm always willing to engage that struggle, always, and that's why I'm forthright and transparent and telling you what I believe. It's not like I got a hidden agenda. I ain't gonna say this because it might not sound good on Jared Ball's show or his audience might. No, I'm gonna tell you what I believe, and then what someone else believes, and we can, let's talk about it. But I'm confident from a tactical and strategic and ideological point of view that I'm more on the right side than on the wrong side. And I think and if you want to make tactical discussions, let's do that. But let's not get everything confused. So that's the way I go about it. So I can't say what Black people's relationship to communism should be. But I do say this: Black people should know that Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois and Claudia Jones and Patterson were communists. They should know that Martin Luther King rejected anti-communism, and then
rejected capitalism.
The thing is, then we can decide as Black folk. But as long as you got all this noise where, trans rights are the same as Black rights, no. They're not equivalent in the revolutionary process, right? It might serve some, virtue signaling impulses, but we're talking about the hardcore question of how, you say anti-capitalism. Everybody, well, I'm against capitalism. Well, you can say that, but what does that mean in practice? What does that, and then you could say that in your comfortable office at your university, where you're the radical professor. But on the ground, you don't mean much of anything. And I think that's where we're at, Jared. How do we bring about fundamental change? You don't have to say you're just. As a matter of fact, I'm tired of these Negroes always. I'm anti-capitalist. Okay, you figured that out. What, 2 weeks ago? I mean, I mean,
yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't. Some people say, well, at least you should acknowledge that they're talking anti-capitalism now, where a generation ago they wouldn't have said it. Well, the question is not what you say, but the content of what you're saying and how it translates into practice. And that's it.
Right on. No, I appreciate that. Right on. So tell us real quick about the Saturday Free School. We've linked to that as well in the show description, and what that's all about, and how people can join or follow it.
Well, the Saturday Free School is kind of like everything we've been talking about. We founded it about 10 years ago. In fact, we celebrated our 10th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. At Temple University. Very small thing to re-establish what the way Black Studies was. Temple is in the middle of North Philadelphia. North Philadelphia, among other things, has given us so much, including John Coltrane and Lee Morgan
and the Roots, who, despite being Jimmy side band, are really
the Roots,
a brilliant historical group.
Jill Scott. I could go on, Barbara Mason, but Teddy Pendergrass. But in spite of that, students in Black Studies had no connection to the people of North Philadelphia. In fact, they looked down upon them. So it was an attempt to do what Black Studies originally was doing, but also to update it. And so it was called the Free School, the freedom schools of SNCC and the Civil Rights Movement, the liberation schools of the Panthers. But it was also looking back to the free universities of Germany back during the 1920s, where discourse in art and politics and science was elevated, and really to do much of what was not being done or could not be done in an academic department. But then it became kind of dicey being at Temple, so we moved to the Church of the Advocate in North Philly. You might know of it. That's where the second Black Power Conference was held. That's where Panthers held their Revolutionary Constitutional Convention, but much, much more associated with the name of this great figure, Father Paul Washington, liberation theology, the defense of the ordinary people, including move against the police and so on. A great legacy. But we increasingly anchored ourselves ideologically and philosophically and theoretically in the works of W.E.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King, and James Baldwin. And we could talk about that. How do they come together? And that's a very great question. By the way, Baldwin is severely underestimated and not taught. Maybe you teach him at Morgan.
No, I don't. I can't claim that I do.
Yeah,
I don't.
But I know they didn't. You can take every course in African American Studies at Temple, maybe Penn, and you won't really get into Baldwin. But Baldwin is. I think Baldwin again is. People talk about Jean-Paul Sartre, yada yada yada, great figure, but he doesn't have anything on Baldwin as an existentialist. In fact, I think Baldwin gets at deeper existential problems. And then, of course, Martin Luther King, who we in the Free School say is the father of a new American people, a new American nation. And that's a hard one. Another thing I don't quite understand, how people so underestimate King.
Oh, that to me is easy. I mean, again, a massive propaganda machine for the last 50 years. I mean, it's massive and very well targeted. Yeah.
But people like you and I, do we have to adopt the positions of the ruling elite and their propaganda?
No, but I'm just saying. But I know what I put in a little work in trying to raise up the real king and whatnot. But it's hard. I mean, it's. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
I don't think it's that hard. It's hard in a university seminar or a graduate seminar. It's not that hard among the people. I'm not exaggerating this. They have not forgotten Martin Luther King.
No, but the version they have of him is so distorted. That's really what I mean. The heart isn't bringing him up. The heart is penetrating that.
The version. See, that's another thing. We assume things about the people. We don't know what their version is. We don't know. We know what Al Sharpton's version is. We know that he propagates his version, and he thinks he's Martin Luther King.
So just to be clear, what I get it. I'm in academia, but I'm exclusively engaged with students from the poorest of the Black world.
Right.
So I feel like the students that come into my class are a pretty good representation of quote unquote the people, and between them and then of course my colleagues and of course the mainstream media and that give this never-ending version of King as the softest, most backward, not real version of himself. I think that's the difficulty. I think it's getting them to see and to actually engage him as he was.
Well, but see, that's the job of the professor. That's the job of the public figure, and so on and so forth. Of course, people, it's like this split consciousness when it comes to, well, we knew he was great, but what? So people have questions. I don't know absolutely what most Black people think of King. I don't know that they accept the official version completely. They might have a split consciousness about him. But the fact of the matter is that Black elites have done a horrible job when it comes to Martin Luther King.
That's
horrible
facts. Yes.
Job.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't want,
because they were one of his core targets for criticism in his lifetime. That's of course that's why they can't.
Look, Jared, let's be for real. Take your generation.
Mm-hmm.
Take your generation. I bet you if you went to a man and woman, you could not find one person among Black academics that would have very much good to say about King. They would say, well, we down with the radical King. I asked the question, well, when wasn't he radical? When was he not radical? I mean, look at him. Look at his time at Crozier Theological Seminary. When was he not anti-fascist? I mean, let's be real. His dissertation is written on Paul Tillich, a socialist, a German socialist theologian. Why did he choose him? Because he was not radical? We don't know Martin Luther King.
No, and I agree with you. That's my point. I'm very with you on that.
Difference of young intellectuals and academics to knowing Martin Luther King. Look, William L. Patterson, love him to death. Love him. All of them, Jackson, Jim Jackson, Esther and all, Winston. One of the things that they acknowledge, that King was this great figure that was changing the nation. And he did. The civil rights movement changed this country. Did it make the ultimate revolution? Not yet. But the conditions that we fight on are different than they were then. And, excuse me.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
But we have to know more. We have to be humble. I think that's one of the criticisms I have, and it's not of you, it's not ad hominem, but of so many of young academics, too careerist, too self-absorbed, too narcissistic. They talk too much about themselves and, quote, their book, their role models are more Ibram Kendi than W.E.B. Du Bois or even Baldwin. They want to be that. And why? And if that's what you want to be, that's okay. But don't say you.
I will. I think you're right in I think you're right broadly speaking, but I think that there are those who of my generation and youngers who are doing some of that work. I mean, we just did a lot of talking about the Loggins and Douglas book about King, and they're younger certainly than me. So
and I'd like to meet
and the crew of folks that I don't know them, but the crew of folks that we gather around here, I think it's a little, but I hear you, and I'm with you, and I'm on that point. I definitely agree. And
something. Let me show you, Jared.
Sure.
And let me just ask the question.
Sure.
When I was in the thing with Molefi and Job and all that at Temple, I bet you most of your crew were more favorable to Molefi. And I would say, and let me tell you how it might reflect itself. Well, I ain't gonna get involved in that. See that indifference about
that part. None of us did enough, myself included, and I was openly on your side. I don't know what you remember, but I interviewed you and I interviewed students at that time. I was openly on your side. I can't speak for anybody else, and that was not enough. So I acknowledge that.
You can speak for somebody else because what I'm saying is.
No, I mean, I can't speak for why they didn't do whatever they didn't do. I'm just saying I didn't do enough.
That's right. But one thing I would argue.
But it wasn't because I agree with Molefi or even politically. Like, I've never been in that camp, and nobody in my particular circles has either. So that's, but anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would just say that most of your group, and now this was 2015. This is 7-8 years ago. So people have changed. Everybody's not what they were then. But my point is the following. There would be a predisposition among people in your circle to agree with Molefi before they would agree with me. Because all he had to say and all that they had to say, Tony is a communist. Or as Molefi said, I'm a communist apparatchik, not a scholar. That's all he had to say. A knee jerk, because why? And this is a point I was getting at. Young scholars are too busy pursuing careers than to reckon with the history that produced them, both the positive and the negative. They don't know Robeson. They don't give a damn about Robeson. They don't know Du Bois, and they really don't know Du Bois, and this is shameful, frankly. The ruling class has invented a guy named Ibram Kendi. There's not much there, believe me. It's more performance to a white liberal elite, and they reward you well when you do that. But the hard work of science, of really being a radical or revolutionary, I don't see much of a stomach for it in the academy. That's why we had to form the free school. Can't do much in these universities. Most of the graduate students are careerists. They don't want to, do anything to make it difficult for them to get jobs, And of course, like we had a conference over the weekend celebrating Du Bois' 155th birthday. And it was we called it a symposium on the work Black Reconstruction in America. And the title of it, which I'm certain would scare a lot of academics off, the title was The Black Proletariat and the Fourth American Revolution, the Making of a New American People. Well, first of all, Black proletariat. That's not an acceptable word in academia. It might become one if they can water it down, but there's certain language cues that academics, be they black, white, or otherwise, lean towards. Certain language is not acceptable in the academy. You say proletariat, what are you saying? You a communist? Yada, yada, yada. You know, it's easier to say black people because that's often ill-defined. What are you talking about? Who are black people? What class among black people? Or, you know, current thing, we're global Africans. I find that to be, you know, really just a joke, frankly. That's all I'm saying. It's a tamed intelligentsia. It's an intelligentsia that knows what side their bread is buttered on, who is paying them, and what the university will tolerate. They're not going to upset anything, and that's the problem. And so they can say they're left, which I find to be a nebulous phrase. I mean, left, what is, you know, I'm left because I'm a trans. A lot of people, I'm trans, so I'm left, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But no sacrifice, no deep commitment, et cetera. That's what I would say. So the free school is an attempt to bring back the old school of intellectual ideological practice. And we meet every week, and we're situated within the community of North Philly and beyond.
Right on. And is it live streamed, or the videos that we see posted?
Every week it's live streamed. We have a YouTube channel, and we have a Facebook page. And it's, you know, and just like, you know, we go through, by the way, if you were part of it, Jared, all of those chapters of Black Reconstruction that you didn't remember reading, you would have read them. Because we do that kind of deep reading.
I mean, I hear you loud and clear. And by the way, like I said off air, make sure you check out Josh Meyer's new book of Black Study.
Yeah, you told me that.
Because he shouts you out, and I think you might I'd be interested in what you think about what he does, because I have to go back. The more I think about it, he's doing some of what you're saying, but at the same time, he might be doing some of what you're critical of in terms of his. I got to go back and look to what he doesn't say about DuBois and communism and socialism. But I have to go. I got to look at. I'm reading it. I'm rereading it. But he does shout you out, and I'd be interested. I think you would enjoy what he's doing.
He was in my class that I taught, graduate class on DuBois Temple. You know, cat being pulled in many directions, and you know, you have to resolve these contradictions. And so he could hear me, but on the other side, he could hear African-centeredness. You know, see, some things are irreconcilable ideologically. Some things are, I mean, at the ideological level, at the level of people and unity and struggle, that's another thing. But at the level of ideas, you know, we have to have the courage to say what is irreconcilable. That I'm not, you know, like I say, I'm not Afrocentrist. You know, does that mean I'm not Black? No. That means I don't go with that ideology. That is not the only ideology of Blackness. But, you know.
And it in of itself is not, I think, a singular, clear ideological position. Sure. There are varieties of African-centered or Afrocentric thought too. So anyway, but listen, I can't, I'm like I said, I'm very happy we reconnected. I'm very happy that you came on. I love this conversation. I do look forward to doing it again. I'm definitely going to revisit Black Reconstruction and more. But I, you know, Professor Anthony Monteiro, I thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jared. It's so great to you don't realize how happy I am to reconnect with you.
All right, right on. I appreciate that. Likewise, and we'll continue to build. We'll be in touch. Don't worry. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Take good care. All right. All right, everybody. Look, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, or at least half as much as I did, or partially, because even then it would have still been great. And apologies to the chat that we didn't get to engage this time around, but we'll definitely have Professor Monteiro back again at some point and build from there. But if you want to continue to engage, please definitely like, share, subscribe, join, do all of those good things. And obviously, you can continue to support and continue the discussion by
put it in the comments.
And we'll continue the dialogue there. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Like Fred Hampton used to say, till we say peace, only if you're willing to fight for it. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like It throughout the entire BPM platform. Thanks again to Professor Monteiro and all of you. Catch you next time right here at I Mix What I Like. Thanks.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.